Welcome everyone, this is Jennifer Coffey. I am the program lead for the State Personnel Development Grant Program in the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP. Today I'm going to provide you some information about what we call the SPDG, the State Personnel Development Grants competition for fiscal year 2021. So that's 84.323A. Applications are due March 9th. So you have 75 days to respond to the notice that was published December 30th. Just a note that this does not take the place, this webinar does not take the place of reading the entire notice inviting applications. It's a long document. You might give yourself a couple of days to really get into it, but it's very detailed. There's quite a bit of information, and so this webinar could not possibly take the place of that unless it was many hours long. But I did want to give you some important considerations, just point out details to you that may be overwhelmed by all the information in the notice. So this is guidance only. Also, if this is the first time you've applied for a discretionary grant, or if it's been a while, I highly recommend using the link in this slide to go to our previous webinars that describe funding opportunities. It talks about how to apply for a grant as opposed to the specifics of the grant program, which is what I'm going to go through today. So today's topics, the purpose of the SPDG program, some assistance you can delve into for developing your plan for your SPDG, the 3 absolute priorities, a few key definitions that you should understand what we're talking about in the notice, the contracts and subgrants that are required for this program, also the Government Performance Results Act, or GEPRA, measures that you will need to describe how you will be capturing over the life of your grant. Some general requirements, and we'll kind of skim through the selection criteria. You can take a deeper look on your own. So the purpose of the SPDG, notice I have bolded, in order to improve results for children with disabilities. That is the reason for being for the program. It's not, and also if you happen to be able to, it is to improve results for children with disabilities. Please keep that in mind. And so it's about reforming and improving systems for personnel preparation and professional development in early intervention, educational, and transition services. Again, this informational webinar does not take the place of doing all your reading of the entire package. These are tips, but this is a peer-reviewed competition. So I myself will not be reviewing applications. I will not be weighing in on them. In the review process. And so keep in mind, I'm just providing tips, but we do have reviewers who are bringing expertise and knowledge to the table, and they may see things a little bit differently. If you are receiving new SPDG money, your state, in fiscal year 2021, you cannot apply for this grant. If you are in a no-cost extension in fiscal year 2021, you may, or of course, if you don't have any SPDG grant money at all, you may. The only eligible applicants are state educational agencies, SEAs. For example, the New York Department of Education, the Louisiana Department of Education, etc. Those are just examples. They are the only eligible applicants. NASD, in collaboration with OSEP, we put together presentations and recorded them so you can see slides and some other resources and listen to recordings at this LiveBinder site that NASD put together, and they will help you to consider what goes into your plan for the SPDG. We also have some support for logic modeling. So I think a logic model is a really important building block for the rest of your work, for your evaluation plan and for the work itself, the implementation plan itself. So this is one source of technical assistance on logic models. There are many others out there, but I do think it's a great idea to sit down with your team and to think through what your logic model is. So the notice has 3 priorities. The last time, if you've applied for a SPDG before, unless it was last year, you did not apply for absolute priority 3 before. So that is the new one. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Absolute priority 3 is its own funding category. So it's not a competitive preference priority, it's an absolute priority. And that means in this instance, you do not have to respond to absolute priority 3. You do have to respond to absolute priority 1 and 2, but not to absolute priority 3. However, we intend to award 1/3 of the grants to applicants responding to absolute priority 3, at least 1/3 of the grants to those applicants responding to absolute priority 3. So keep that in mind. If applicants responding to absolute priority 3 are not of sufficient quality, our applications are not of sufficient quality, we may not be able to do that, but that is the goal here. Is the intention is to award 1/3 of the grants to applicants who are responding to absolute priority 3. You must clearly identify that you're doing so. It shouldn't be something that the reviewers have to really search out. It should be plain as day that that's what you're doing. So again, you still respond to absolute priority 1 and 2, whether or not you are responding to absolute priority 3. So for absolute priority 1, this is something if you've applied for a SPDG, in the last, since 2004 basically, or maybe a little bit after that, we described it this way, but it's been a while. You must demonstrate how you will use evidence-based professional development practices. So this is not the intervention per se that you're supporting, this is how you support the intervention. And that is also that you will increase implementation of those practices, implementation fidelity, and that those practices will result in improved outcomes for children with disabilities. So making that connection between implementation and that impact on children. You also have to describe how you'll provide ongoing assistance to people. So it's not just that first level training, it's not just a workshop, it's not just engaging in a module. How do you support the use of practices after that so that it's fully implemented and sustained? Using technology, this is a consideration of, are you going to use technology to support coaching? So something that helps you to have video of an instructor, say a teacher, whoever it happens to be, using the practices, and the coach can then give feedback from that. There's what has been called bug and ear coaching before. Are you using modules so that the first level training can be done, can be done asynchronously whenever they want, and then you support them with coaching after? Are you using something a little bit more, are you using micro-credentials through an online system? There's a lot of different technology that can be used here, and it's just considering what will help you be more efficient and effective. Absolute priority 2 is the bigger priority, and that is your big plan for what you're going to do. And this means that you're taking into consideration the needs across your state. You're taking into consideration the initiatives that you already have in place. You're thinking about how you can align with those initiatives or leverage those initiatives, or work together. You're thinking about the different agencies that serve the children who are going to be your target population. You're thinking about your partners. This is the state personnel development plan, along with the activities that you choose, the initiatives that you choose to support. It could just be one, it could be more than one, and we'll talk about that. Absolute priority 3, we already talked about what the the basic idea of what this absolute priority means for the application process, but not the content that it's supporting. And so this is about personalized professional development projects to carry out your state plan. So it still needs to be about the needs that you found in the state for personnel who work with children with disabilities. It still needs to take into consideration your partners and how you get that to that impact level. But this is thinking about, so how can you include choice in this? So the personnel you're working with, thinking about the goal of where you're trying to get, how can you make it so that they have some choice, so that's more personalized to their needs, the needs that they have for the specific skills and competencies? What could that look like? And you'll be describing that in the notice. And really, it'll still be in the narrative, just like the other work will be. Again, you'll flag that you're responding to this priority. You'll talk about how you're personalizing it. You'll describe how it will work, but it would be part of the narrative, just like the rest of your work would be. And it also, you need to consider, is this going to help the personnel to reach certain requirements, hours that they're going to have to fill? Will it help them for renew their certification or retain it? So think about how this personalized learning, professional learning that the personnel can choose, how is that going to help them with requirements that are in the state, in the district? How is it going to work within that overall system? So if you're responding to absolute priority 3, you need to describe the extent that this work will use professional development practices supported by evidence to support the team. So the basic idea is, if you are having somebody else, if they can choose other providers for their professional development, how will you ensure that they are using effective professional development practices? How are you going to monitor fidelity of implementations? It's still a requirement. Whoever is doing it, you still need the data that personnel are receiving professional development, they are improving their skills, they're using those skills. You'll still need to be able to track that, and so you have to think through what that would look like. And then after initial training, there still needs to be support, so coaching, mentoring, whatever that looks like. You'll still need a way of ensuring that there is support, whether or not it's the state that's providing it, another group that's providing it. How will you monitor that, collect data on that? And also, if a focus is on teacher retention, then you will need to collect data on whether special education teachers are still practicing special education 2 years after their initial participation in the SPDG activities. So that's only if you have a focus on teacher retention. And then you'll also have to access data on, or collect your own data on, how outcomes for children with disabilities are improved. So basically the same GEPRA measures that we use for all SPDG work will apply for absolute priority 3 as well. But it's potentially a more challenging consideration, because you may be doing it a different way than you're doing your other work. Personnel here, I've been talking about personnel quite a bit. This is what it means: special education teachers, regular education teachers, principals, administrators, related services personnel, paraprofessionals, early intervention personnel serving infants, toddlers, preschoolers, or children with disabilities. And that except, it does not, this is a broader definition IDA, and the except does not count here. Fidelity here means the delivery of instruction in the way it was designed to be delivered. So additional SPDG requirements: when you're writing your grant and creating your budget and your budget narrative, you need to budget for an annual 3-day project directors meeting in Washington, DC. We also have, currently, the project directors conference for OSEP has been every other year, but it could go back to every other year, so this is planning for that. We also do have a SPDG national meeting each year in DC, with the exception of this year when it was virtual, but that's something to consider in your budgeting. You must budget $4,000 annually for support of the SPDG program website, SIG Network. And then if you are going to have a website, or if you're using a website for the project that already exists, you have to make sure that it is accessible. And that means that it's got to meet a government or industry recognized standard for accessibility. You'll have to describe that in your application. Contracts with subgrants. So this is what is required for this program. You must award a contract or a subgrant to at least one LEA, at local education agency, at least one IHE, Institute of Higher Education, and either your parent training and information center or a community parent resource center if you have one. Not every state has a community parent resource center, which is OSEP funded, but the OSEP funded parent training and information center, you definitely have. So you must have a contract or subgrant to one LEA, one IHE, and one PTI at least, or CPRC. And that is for each year of your grant. And so start talking to those partners, start developing plans with them. The worst case scenario is that you develop a plan and then tell this partner what they're going to do. The best case scenario is that you've been talking to them for a while about what you think you'd like to do. You know what their strengths are, you know how to play to those strengths, they understand their role in the work, and it's not just a letter of support when you turn in your application. It's a true plan for collaboration. And also that you are ready to measure the impact that that work has. You measure what you treasure, treasure what you measure, whichever way you say it. Measuring the work is really important. Then there's, you may award contracts and subgrants to other groups as well, but I talked about the required contracts or subgrants. Use of funds for professional development. At least 90% of your funds need to go to professional development activities described in paragraph A. Not more than 10% of funds go to the work, the activities described in paragraph B. And let me show you where that is in your notice inviting applications application package. So we've got here. So this is the notice inviting applications, or sorry, the application package. And this is, you can see page B8. And see where it says use of funds. And then this is the professional development activity section. So it says, you know, what I just read to you was at least 90% of the funds that you're requesting should go toward the work that you choose from this area. So it talks about you can choose programs that support special education and regular education teachers of children with disabilities and principals. And then this is about teacher mentoring, team teaching, thinking about class schedules, caseloads, intensive professional development, you got standards and assessments, collaboration, consultative. So you can get in depth in all your different choices here, but I wanted to point out to you where they were so you can more easily find them. And this is about collaboration, provide training and methods of positive behavioral interventions and supports, scientifically based reading instruction, early and appropriate interventions, effective instruction for children with low incidence disabilities, successful transition to post-secondary. You know, so there are many things to choose from in here. And again, you should be connecting it with your state needs and the work that's already going on, and et cetera. So all the things I talked about the state plan earlier. Now the section B, which I skipped over, where are we? Other activities, there we go. So you can see this is on page B10. Other activities, so you can spend up to 10% of your funds on this. So it's talking about reforming special education and regular education teacher certification or licensing requirements. And thinking about special education and regular education teachers and the subject matter. Talks about alternative routes, teacher advancement initiatives, recruitment and retention, reforming tenure systems, reciprocity for teacher certification or licensing, merit-based performance systems. Some of them are a little bit more broad and really go along nicely with subsection A. So it's, you know, this is section 9 right here. And again, I'll let you just take a closer look yourself. But I wanted to give you a sense of that up at least 90%, up to 10%. And you may think about how section A and section B dovetail or fit together. Are you going to choose something from section B that really supports the work that you're choosing in section A? So I talked earlier about GEPRA, the performance measures, and here they are again. So we use something that we call Rubric A, evidence-based professional development rubric. And this is about effective professional development practices, and we've really defined those for this SPDG. And so you will have a chance to take a look at the rubric and think about what that means for your plan, and then describe it in your application. You will also be capturing data on implementation fidelity. So the support that you give with your professional development should lead to improved implementation in the personnel you're working with. And you'll be capturing that implementation fidelity data. And then as a result of that, I'm going to move all the way to the last one. Improved fidelity of those practices should then lead to improved outcomes for children with disabilities. So that's the connection you're making with GEPRA. In addition to that, you're going to talk about how you're using funds that continue to support implementation and that support sustainability. And that's, I was talking about coaching, mentoring, that ongoing work to support implementation. And here again, if you have an initiative that is supporting teacher retention, then you specifically need to follow the teachers that you are supporting and collect data on where they are serving. So are they still in the classroom? Are they still special education teachers, etc.? So GEPRA resources. We have some good resources for you here on SIG Network. And then here's that rubric I was talking about, the evidence-based professional development components rubric. And so if you click through to there, this is the worksheet. And you should be considering, and this is what projects give us, funded projects give us for their annual performance report. So they look at the required elements and then they fill in the section to the right. So this is about expectations for professional development participants, so that when you are, say you were working with an early childhood program, that they understand what you expect of them and what they'll be receiving and what they'll be giving to you in the relationship. Expectations for SPDG trainers and SPDG coaches. And so the personnel who work on this project, do they understand what's expected of them, what it looks like to be a coach or a trainer, how they'll be assessed for using the practices, how they'll be supported and improving over time. So this goes into that a little bit more. Accountability for delivering quality of training, using effective research-based adult learning strategies. This is really critical because this is what this grant is. These active engagement strategies, supporting personnel to learn new skills or to improve their skills and to demonstrate those skills. And that's what get into here with adult learning strategies. Here's the skill-based. So how are you going to measure the training when people are in training? How are you going to measure their use of the new skills? Are they able to do it? Can they demonstrate it before they leave that training? The training provided to trainers, the coaching provided to trainers, how they're observed, Fidelity instrument for the training. how you are supporting administrators in this work. So it's not just going to say you're working with teachers. It's not just the teacher on the ground. It's the administrator that's supporting them, because the context they're working in is also critical. And they don't work in a vacuum. So how are you going to support the administrators from day one? What's your plan? And do the administrators understand that going in? Training outcome data. So what's the impact of the training? And then this gets into the coaching services and having a coaching service delivery plan. And you can find some support there from the CSEP website. I'll show you a link to their website in a moment. But having a coaching service delivery plan is really critical. It helps you put some structure to what you plan to do with your coaching. And once you have that really a good understanding of what that's going to look like, you can share that with your coaches can share that with your schools, and everyone has a shared understanding. Coaching outcome data, what kinds of impact does the coaching have? Is it working? Is the dosage enough? Are they using the right strategies? And the NASD LiveBinders site I talked about has a good presentation on coaching that you might want to access. Measuring fidelity and student outcomes and connecting the two. Once the fidelity improves, are the child outcomes improving? And then having good data systems that work together, that you can determine, how are we doing? How do we need to improve? You can have that continuous improvement cycle. How do you engage stakeholders at the different levels to make so that the decision makers have the data to make the decisions, and the people who can remove barriers or who can support with more guidance know what the challenges are and know what's working well. So what does that communication loop look like? And then this is about the technical and adaptive leadership of the project at the state level. So your management team, your implementation team, how are they overseeing this work and working from the data? And then building state level capacity. This is, we don't want this SPDG to be a one and done. How are others learning from your work? How are you learning from others' work at the state level? What does it mean for supporting other initiatives? How are you working together? And here you can see this is a link to some of the resources. I talked about CSEP, State Implementation Scaling Up of Evidence-Based Practices TA Center. So you can get to the Fidelity lesson that they have here, implementation fidelity, but you can also just use that as a stepping off point to get to information about coaching and other work that I've talked about already. We know this is an uncertain year, but we do need you to paint a picture of who your partners will be and the sites that you'll work with. Even if you are not 100% certain that everything will go as planned with the sites that you plan to work with, we need to understand what their demographics and what that partnership is going to look like. The fact that they're aware that they're going to, the plan is to work with you. So you will work with your project officer. You can work things out after we understand the uncertainties of this year, but you still do need to paint a picture in your application of what it's going to look like. Also, you may want to ask for a lower level of funding the first year due to the fact that there's a lot going on. It might be hard to get into schools right away. If you're working with schools, early intervention programs, whoever you're working with, it might be hard to get in there. And so you may want to request a lower funding level the first year as you start to ramp up and then get into full implementation from there. General requirements, please make sure you respond to these in your application. Positive efforts to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities. Involve individuals with disabilities or parents of individuals with disabilities in planning, implementing, and evaluating the project. So stakeholder engagement, voice, this is something that states have worked on quite a bit with their SIP, and that's something that you can be leveraging for this work. Our expectations at OSEP for engaging families in discretionary grants is that, again, the planning, implementing, and evaluating the projects that family members are involved. There's some great work happening in Minnesota that is engaging parents in evaluating work, and it's called parent participatory evaluation. And getting those voices, once people are really actively engaged in the work, change happens, things happen. And so consider evaluation and what that means with engaging families. Think about, how are you going to reach families equitably? What does that mean for your work? Looking at the demographics of the area you're working with, their history, the understanding your sites, and what is that going to mean for engaging families? Honoraria and stipends, so that families can be truly engaged. You know, their childcare and travel, taking that into consideration. Recruiting family members for positions on projects. That might mean using non-traditional recruitment and networking strategies. We assume that you're going to bring family perspectives and experience into your project operations. And we want you to have a real clear plan for how families will be engaged. You need to be able to tell that story in your application. How are you going to build these partnerships? Incorporating current research. So if I go back here and you can see the link to building capacity, we have a family engagement resource page on our SIG Network website that you can access as you're putting together your application. You can see the building partnerships, models for family and community engagement, research and best practices. How do you assess for planning, evaluation, and continuous improvement? Engaging culturally and linguistically diverse families, and engagement linked to learning models. So please do take a look at this and really consider what that means for your work. You're going to be more successful if you successfully bring families along in your work, if they help you to make decisions, if they're, again, part of that evaluation, as well as part of the planning. So funding amounts, we have about $9 million for this year. The estimated ranges of awards are $500,000 to $2.1 million. Keeping in mind that outlying areas ask for at least $80,000, but they are not, they do not have the minimum of $500,000 that the states DC and Puerto Rico have. So you must ask for at least $500,000 a year. We did give some more, we had some questions arise last year about how much a state can ask for. And so we wanted to give you a little bit more information about that. You have to consider the population of your state. And so you can see outlying area of Guam had received $250,000 for their first year. These amounts for some of the states are actually a little bit low even compared to what they received in the out years, the years after this. And again, that was because they knew they couldn't necessarily get right into their schools or their early intervention sites right away. And so they asked for less the first year. So that might not be reflective. But the basic idea is that if you are a low population state, then you should ask for, you know, a lesser amount than, say, a New York. So I think the proportions here are the important part, not really the specific amounts for each state. An Illinois and a New York have a much larger population than, say, a Montana, and that's the importance of that example that is on B21. So we do, it is important, again, to think of your population when you're creating that amount. And these are all the considerations we can take into place. And I talked about alignment. You can see that in number 5. use of research, evidence, format and page. So these are current recommendations, no longer requirements as they had been in the past. And you can take a look at that in your application package. There's also information about where to put things in your application package. Take a look at that. I just wanted to point that out to you, that exists. Take a deeper look. Selection criteria. So you can see where we have 20 points for significance, 25 points for project design, and that's where you really paint that picture of what it's all going to look like. The reviewer needs to see it. So think about that. Think about having a novice reader look at your application before you turn it in. So that means someone who is not deeply involved in your day-to-day work of putting together this plan, and they may be able to point out things to you that don't quite make sense to them, that need a little more information, they're not clear. And that will help you then for the reviewers to make sure that there's something that's not just a little bit fuzzy, that only people who are really involved understand the term or what you're getting at. Quality of project personnel, adequacy of resources, and quality of management plan. So that management plan really, again, giving them a sense that you have enough FTE, you have enough time on the project. There's someone who's really going to be in charge of the training. There's someone who's going to be in charge of the data collection. There's a management team that's going to oversee it. So having a strong management plan. And here again, 25 points for project evaluation. Do you have an evaluator who's going to be helping you collect the data, who's going to be a critical friend, helping you make the important decisions, put it all together? Do you understand how you're going to connect coaching and Fidelity and child outcomes all together? So that's the picture you draw in your project evaluation plan. We're just about out of time, so I wanted to point out that one of the things that has come up in the past is about Project Reflect's up-to-date knowledge. So if your research that you're basing your work on is not recent, but it is the only thing that's available, or it is seminal, point that out. Don't leave anything. There we go. Don't leave it up to the reviewer to understand that. Make sure that you connect. We talked about the logic model. From the logic model, you have your objectives, and you think about that evaluation plan, but connect your objectives with your timelines and your milestones. And what's that? Again, that's part of drawing the picture, that they understand that you're going to be able to carry it out, the reviewers do. And then sustainability. What is your plan for sustaining this work after the 5 years? And it should be going in that you have whoever you're working with, whether it's an early intervention site, it's a school, it's a district, et cetera, you should have a plan for sustainability with them on day one going into the work, what you want that to look like. Because you're using effective practices, you're taking in research-based practices, you're supporting them. You already think they're going to work. How do you know that they're going to sustain there? And you can see that provide performance feedback and permit periodic assessment of progress. And so those are those communication protocols, communication loops of how the data is going to reach different places that we saw in the evidence-based professional development rubric. Thank you so much. This was a lot. I will likely have another informational webinar, because what I do is I take people's questions, I answer them, and then I put them together in webinar form so that every potential applicant has access to the answers that I gave. So please be on the lookout for that. If you need grants.gov training, you can see it there. If you have any problem with grants.gov at all, please contact their support desk as soon as you have an issue. But thank you for listening through to the end today, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.